Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RetroGamingTech.com video, we're going to be discussing as well as analysing tech news, which as usual has popped up in the past 24 or so hours. Hopefully you're having an amazing day. We've got quite a lot of stuff to get through in today's video. I want to start things out though with AMD's Ryzen 5000 series. This specifically revolves around the clock frequency and why AMD did not opt to go for 5 GHz for any of the SKUs. Of course, the caveat here is that in different system configurations, well, the CPUs can boost higher, and it is possible that your SKU could hit 5 GHz, but it's certainly not a guarantee. And the question is, why is this? Well, Joe McCree from AMD has actually taken to explain why this is. Well, first of all, we want to deliver on our promises, he said. It's an important thing for us to build trust with our users around the world, and when it allows the cores to go to high frequencies, it's a couple of things. One of them is what we call the voltage frequency curve, which is basically associated with each of the cores on the device. The process technology isn't constant, there's variability to it. Some cores are just going to be better than other cores. In so many words, he's basically describing silicon lottery. Basically, you can have, let's just say, a 9900K, just a nice easy overclocking processor that can hit 5.2, 5.3 gigahertz, and you would be happy in skipping down the street. On the other hand, your friend might have one that literally, the moment you try to get all of the cores to 5 gigahertz or something like that, it just conks. You could put the equivalent of a nuclear power plant through the thing and cool it with pretty much any cooling solution you can imagine, and it won't make a difference. And that right there is silicon lottery. And even the same wafer, even the same silicon wafer itself, certain chips can do better, and also there's variability in terms of sometimes even the week it's produced. So there's a lot of stuff there that are moving parts. So he also adds that everything is just not the same. What you're seeing is a variability and allows you to punch through what we're promising. He said the big factor is environment. What we're looking at is local voltages, local temperatures at the transistor. And so effectively, if you have a good cooling solution, if the room temperature and ambient temperature is in a good place, this will allow it to boost higher. Power delivery is another important piece. Again, it's not constant. There's variability, there's inductance to the path that goes through the package. Everything is not the same. And what we're seeing is variability allows us to punch through what we're promising. Ultimately, he says that we want to do what we can to deliver on our promises. Yes, in many cases you will go above it, and it may not be the one core that will go above it, but that's the beauty of the system we've built. It's dynamic and it reacts to the environment, and it reacts to the actual transistor that sits on a particular piece of silicon. End quote. This, of course, doesn't stop you from manually overclocking Zen 3 or any other Ryzen processor. You can feel free to do that, but naturally, AMD's processors do work on a per-core basis, and the clock frequency adjustment is definitely very fine-grained. It's pretty cool in terms of the system, and it does maximize the ability of each core, but with that said, um, there are clearly engineering samples that most likely were capable of hitting 5 gigahertz, and AMD probably could have done this, but what they're essentially saying is that they wouldn't have hit the yields, most likely, that would have been necessary for them to crank out the processors in any large enough volume. In fact, I've even heard some reports that AMD did actually have even some Ryzen 3000 series processors, which did actually hit 5 gigahertz, but they opted to not release them because they could not get yields high enough. So, yeah, this is just one of those things where, honestly, 100, 200 megahertz would start to affect things such as the yields of the processors, but also temperatures of the CPU as well, because it may not sound like 100, 200 megahertz makes any real difference, but just because of how the voltage curve actually works on silicon, it doesn't necessarily mean that even if, let's say, you're increasing the clock frequency by 1 or 2% or whatever the case is, it doesn't mean that the voltage required at a specific point in the curve is only going to need 1 or 2% extra volts, and that is that law of diminishing returns. Also, something I would like to discuss is PCIe 6.0. There's yet another major milestone which has been released here for the PCIe 6 specification. It should be by 2021 that we see the full PCIe 6 specification release, and you can see the images on screen yourself. These updated specifications, of course, will provide much needed additional bandwidth over the older standards such as PCIe 3, actually an 8 times increase, and over PCIe 4, it's still a 4 times increase and 2 times increase over PCIe 5.0. For quite a long time, we were stuck on PCIe 3.0. It actually became a standard back in 2010, and obviously products then started to support it over the couple of years following. And then 2017 brought in the standard of PCIe 4.0, and yet again, it's a couple of years later that we saw the standard really start to be taken advantage of with AMD's Ryzen 3000 series, plus, of course, the RX 5000 GPUs. And now Intel, of course, are going to be supporting it with a Rocket Lake. AMD, of course, have well established their support for PCIe 4, NVIDIA too, with the Ampere architecture. So basically, what the goal is at the moment is to reduce the time between each PCIe release. It's kind of one of those things where most folks will just focus on, DDR memory. DDR5 obviously will be coming in soonish as well. The number of CPU cores, the speed of the GPU, but there are a ton of other barriers to a system. One of those, of course, is the API itself, but there's also communication too. If you cannot communicate between one component and another fast enough, or there's a large latency, then you're still going to be slowing down the system. As the old saying goes, the convoy is only as fast as the slowest ship can sail, and this is never truer than technology right now. So PCIe 4 is um, pretty nice in terms of what we can do with like SSDs. But by the time that PCIe 6 devices actually make their way to the market, I'm guess just based upon what we've seen in terms of projections and historical events, it's probably going to be like 2023. You can imagine the speed of storage devices and other such add-in cards. The last thing I'd like to discuss today is a series of stories concerning the PlayStation 5, which is obviously going to be hitting store shelves in about a week from now in the US and about 2 weeks from now in the United Kingdom. The first story comes down to availability. Specifically, it's not going to be possible to purchase one of these things in store. Allow me to read out a statement issued on the official PlayStation blog. In the interest of keeping our gamers, retailers, and staff safe amongst the word I can't say, today we are confirming that all day of launch sales will be conducted through the online stores of our retail partners. No units will be available in store for purchase on launch day, which is November 12th or 19th, depending upon your region. Please don't plan on camping out or lining up at your local retailer on launch day in hopes of finding a PS5 console for purchase. Be safe, stay at home, and place your order online. Gamers who have pre-ordered for pickup at the local retailer should still be able to go to the designated appointment time under the retailer's safety protocols. End quote. So obviously, this is going to be very different depending upon the region. The UK at the moment has just entered second lockdown. I'm actually quite lucky because I had originally intended to have my PlayStation 5 delivered to my local store so that I could just mosey down, pick it up, and a couple of games. And I was just going to kind of do it when I'd had breakfast and kind of got myself ready so that I didn't risk missing. Um, a parcel delivery if it happened to come really early, and it just kind of made it easier. And I quite like going to the store and picking up a console. I don't know, I think it's a nostalgia thing. I've been doing it for a long ass time. The PlayStation 1, the Xbox original, and all of that stuff. So yeah, it's just kind of it's just nice for me to have done it. I've already paid for it online, but I just forgot to change the delivery option, and I had it to actually send to my home. And when I started to hear about the, rumors of a potential second lockdown, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to leave that as a delivery. Um, so let me know in the comments below what's happening, because obviously this is impacting the Xbox as well. My Xbox Series X should be delivered soon. I've actually got, again, a pre-order on that. And they're saying that it's not being delayed. I've actually pre-ordered through, again, this is not advertising for them, but I've actually pre-ordered from Game, and yeah, it looks like my order's okay for the Xbox Series X. Keeping on to the subject of the PlayStation, there is a fascinating thread on Twitter. Like all of the other stories today, I'll link it in the description of the video. Full credit to Timmer222. I'm unsure if I pronounced that correctly. It could be Timer, I'm not unsure. But either way, they've made a really good discovery, and it's from an ICE team programmer who, of course, are critical in developing a lot of the graphics tools and optimization tools for Sony's hardware. And I think it's rather telling what you can read on screen. I wrote and maintained the PS4 and PS5 graphics library, GNM, GNMX. I've discussed what these are at length before. This actually confirms some of my earlier rumors, by the way, that the PS5 API is the graphics API, basically an extension of PS4. It basically removes aspects of the PS4 API which were not necessary for the PS5, but it also extends it substantially. So, for example, it can address things such as the geometry engine, the additional RDNA2 functionality, hardware-based ray tracing, all of that stuff. GNM is the lower level extension, which requires more extensive memory management and all of that stuff. Whereas GNMX is a higher level API, which is easier to utilize. So obviously the reason you would use the higher level is if a game is not exactly graphically intensive. Let's say it's an indie title. That's not insulting any indie studio, so we're using this, by the way. I'm just saying that if you're developing like a 2D indie platformer or something like that that doesn't necessarily require the best graphics, then GNMX is going to be absolutely fine for you. Anyway, he continues by saying research graphics performance and advise PlayStation licensees, excuse me, on the technical issues they encounter in ways to improve their graphics code. I do not work on any Naughty Dog games. You will also notice, however, that it states that they are working on PS5, PS4, and quote, next gen hardware. And yeah, I'm fairly certain, as Stadizi points out on Twitter, that this is the PS5 Pro. I'm fairly certain that Sony are internally researching the PlayStation 5 Pro, because if the PS5, basically it's going to be at least a 2 to 3 year gap, I imagine, before the PS5 Pro launches. And research and development and initial bring up of the hardware needs to be happening now to hit that time frame, because otherwise it just won't be achievable. I don't know what the specs of the PS5 Pro are, so we can start to guess. I mean, you can assume that there's going to be a pretty drastic upgrade in the GPU, just like Microsoft are going to be releasing a new generation Xbox, we imagine, and they obviously will need to increase the GPU performance significantly as well. So we can imagine that GPU is going to be significantly more robust on these consoles. I imagine that CPU will also see an update. Um, it's going to be interesting. Depending on the release time frame, we could see this on the 5nm process. Who the hell knows? It could be on 5nm. It could be on a smaller process, but I'm guessing 5nm. So yeah. I don't think it's going to be that long before we start seeing PS5 Pro rumors. It could be the PS6. It definitely could be a PS6. What we know of Sony is that they typically, as a console is even nearing shipping, they will start to do breakdowns on the hardware and figure out what they've done wrong, what they can improve for next generation. And of course, then they will start to work alongside developers, and developers will tell them, well, you know what, this isn't quite right. We could work on this, and Microsoft do much the same thing, of course, for the Xbox. But at this point, I don't think we're going to see PS6. I think it's more likely to be a PlayStation 5 Pro. Obviously, it could definitely be a PlayStation 6. Sony could not release an upgraded console, but my guess is that they will. With all of that said, thank you very much for watching the video. The normal stuff, if you have enjoyed it, like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.